The whip cracked across my bare back for the third time today, but it wasn't the pain that made me gasp. It was the sudden, impossible scent of pine and storm that could only mean one thing: my mate was here, watching me bleed. I forced my face to remain blank as Alpha Marcus raised his arm again. The leather whistled through the air, and I bit down hard on my tongue to keep from crying out. Around us, pack members watched with cruel anticipation, some calling out suggestions for my punishment. Thieving little wolf, Luna Selena spat from her place beside the whipping post. Her perfect blonde hair caught the afternoon sun as she smiled with satisfaction. Though I suppose you're not even that, are you, Arya? Still no wolf at 22. Pathetic. The crowd laughed. I'd heard it all before. Wolfless. Weak. Worthless. The daughter of Omega parents who died defending this very pack, now treated like property by the same wolves they'd given their lives for. I didn't steal anything, I said quietly, my voice hoarse from screaming earlier. Marcus's hand connected with my cheek in a vicious backhand. Lies. The kitchen stores went missing, and you were the only one with access. That wasn't true either. Half the pack had access to those stores. But I was convenient. I was nothing. Nobody would question my punishment. The whip rose again, and I closed my eyes, preparing for the fourth strike. But then that scent hit me again, stronger this time. Wild pine forests after a thunderstorm. Something elemental and dangerous and mine. My eyes snapped open, scanning the crowd of faces twisted with bloodlust and entertainment. There, in the back, half hidden by shadow. Tall, with shoulders that could carry the world. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it. And eyes. Silver eyes that burned like moonlight on water. Our gazes locked, and something inside my chest pulled tight. The stranger's jaw clenched as he took in my position, chained to the post, back raw and bleeding, dress torn and dirty. His hands slowly curled into fists at his sides. He was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. Dangerous. Deadly. And looking at me like I was something precious that had been broken. The whip cracked again, but I barely felt it. I was lost in those silver eyes, in the way his nostrils flared as he scented the air. Could he smell it too? This impossible connection that made no sense. I was wolfless. I was nothing. I couldn't have a mate. Pay attention when you're being punished, Marcus snarled, grabbing my chin and forcing me to look at him. Or I'll add 5 more lashes. When I looked back toward the stranger, he was gone. Vanished like smoke, like he'd never been there at all. But his scent lingered, wrapping around me like a promise. Marcus finally tired of his entertainment as the sun began to set. He released my chains with a harsh clatter, and I collapsed to my knees on the packed dirt. Get her back to the cellar, he ordered 2 of his enforcers. No food tonight. Maybe hunger will teach her not to steal. They dragged me through the pack house and down the narrow stone steps to what had been my home for the past 4 years. The cellar was cold and damp, with walls that wept moisture and air that tasted of mold and despair. My bed was a thin mattress thrown on the floor. My bathroom was a bucket in the corner. The silver chains around my wrists and ankles were spelled to suppress any latent wolf abilities. Not that I had any to suppress, but Marcus enjoyed his precautions. The metal burned constantly against my skin, leaving angry red welts that never quite healed. They threw me inside and slammed the heavy door. I heard the multiple locks engage, silver reinforced, of course. Not that I'd ever tried to escape. Where would I go? What would I do? This was the only life I'd ever known. I crawled to my mattress and curled up on my side, trying to find a position that didn't put pressure on the fresh wounds across my back. The stranger's face swam in my mind. Those silver eyes, the way he'd looked at me like I mattered. Like I was worth something. Stop it, I whispered to myself. He was probably just disgusted by the spectacle. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. There had been something else in his gaze. Recognition, maybe. Or... no. I couldn't let myself think that. Hope was a luxury I'd learned not to afford. Hours passed. The wounds on my back stopped bleeding, forming the familiar pattern of scabs that would heal into scars. I'd lost count of how many I had. My body was a map of Marcus's cruelty. I must have dozed because I woke to the sound of my chains creaking. Not from the outside, from me. I was shaking, my whole body trembling like I had a fever. Heat raced through my veins, starting in my chest and spreading outward. It felt like liquid fire, like lightning in my bloodstream. My bones began to ache, then burn, then feel like they were breaking apart from the inside. No, I gasped, struggling to sit up. No, this isn't possible. But my body didn't care what was possible. 22 years late, my wolf was finally clawing her way to the surface. The pain hit me like a freight train. My back arched as agony tore through every nerve ending. I bit down on my fist to muffle my screams, tasting blood. My bones began to shift and crack, reshaping themselves into something new. The silver chains that had bound me for 4 years began to smoke where they touched my skin. Then they began to glow. Power unlike anything I'd ever imagined flooded through me. Raw, primal, ancient power that had been sleeping in my bloodstream all these years. My wolf wasn't just awakening, she was erupting. The chains shattered. Silver links exploded outward, embedding themselves in the stone walls with sharp pinging sounds. The metal around my wrists and ankles crumbled like sand, falling away from skin that no longer burned. I threw back my head and screamed as my bones finished their violent reshaping. When the pain finally receded, I found myself on hands and knees, panting like I'd run a marathon. But I wasn't alone anymore. Inside my head, a presence stirred. Ancient, powerful, and very, very angry. Mine, she growled, and somehow I knew she wasn't talking about our body. She meant the stranger. The silver-eyed man who'd watched our punishment. Mate. The stone walls of my prison were spider-webbed with cracks, radiating outward from where I knelt. Whatever power had awakened in me, it was strong enough to damage spelled stone. Strong enough to shatter spelled silver. Strong enough, maybe, to change everything. I pushed myself to my feet on shaking legs, staring at the destruction around me. The cellar that had been my cage for 4 years was crumbling. The chains that had bound me were nothing but twisted metal and ash. And somewhere out there in the night, my mate was waiting. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. I was still staring at the destruction around me when the temperature in the cellar dropped 10 degrees. The hair on the back of my neck rose, and my newly awakened wolf pressed against my consciousness, alert and wary. Someone was coming. The locks on my door didn't click open, they simply ceased to exist. The heavy wooden barrier swung inward on silent hinges, and he stepped through like he owned the very air around him. The stranger from the crowd. Up close, he was even more devastating than I'd remembered. Tall enough that he had to duck slightly under the doorframe, with broad shoulders that filled out a black leather jacket like it had been made for him. His dark hair was indeed tousled, like he'd been running his hands through it, and those silver eyes. They swept over the destroyed cellar, taking in the shattered chains and cracked walls, before settling on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Well," he said, and his voice was like aged whiskey and smoke, "that's certainly one way to make an entrance." I pressed myself back against the far wall, acutely aware that my dress was torn and bloody, that I probably looked like something that had crawled out of a grave. "Who are you?" He stepped into the cellar proper, and I caught his scent again, pine and storm and something wild that made my wolf purr with satisfaction. "Damon Blackthorne," he said simply, as if that should mean something to me. It didn't. But my wolf reacted like she'd been struck by lightning. She surged forward in my mind, pressing against my consciousness with desperate need. "Mate," she whispered. "Our mate. Strong. Powerful. Perfect." "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Damon moved closer, slow and careful, like he was approaching a spooked animal. "Your wolf knows," he said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You feel it too, this pull between us. This connection." I did feel it. It was like gravity, like magnetism, like every force in the universe was trying to draw me to him. But it was impossible. "I'm nobody," I said. "I'm wolfless. You're mine," he cut me off, and the possessiveness in his voice made heat coil low in my stomach. "And I'm yours. That's how the mate bond works, little wolf. Little wolf." The endearment made something in my chest flutter. "But I can't be your mate. I'm a slave. I'm property." Damon's expression went cold, dangerous. "You're no one's property. You're a free wolf, and you're coming with me." "I can't just leave," I protested, even though part of me desperately wanted to. "Alpha Marcus will." "Alpha Marcus," Damon said, and there was something in his tone that made my blood run cold, "is about to learn what happens when someone hurts what belongs to me." Before I could ask what he meant, shouts erupted from somewhere above us. Heavy footsteps thundered across the floor overhead, followed by Marcus's voice bellowing orders. "Find him. He's here somewhere. No one enters my territory without permission." Damon smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "Ah. They noticed." "You need to go," I said urgently. "If Marcus finds you." "If Marcus finds me, he's going to wish he hadn't." Damon moved toward the cellar stairs with fluid grace. "Stay here, little wolf. This won't take long." I wanted to protest, to tell him he didn't understand how cruel Marcus could be, how powerful. But something in Damon's eyes stopped me. There was no fear there. No concern. Just cold, calculating confidence. He disappeared up the stairs, and I heard the cellar door close behind him with a soft click. The sounds of fighting began almost immediately. I pressed myself against the wall and listened to the chaos above. Snarls and roars, the crash of furniture breaking, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. Men screaming. The distinctive crack of bones breaking. And through it all, I heard Marcus's voice, growing increasingly panicked. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What do you want?" Damon's response was too quiet for me to hear, but whatever he said made Marcus emit a sound I'd never heard from the Alpha before, a whimper of genuine fear. The fighting stopped abruptly. Footsteps approached the cellar door, and it swung open again. Damon appeared at the top of the stairs, completely unruffled except for a small cut on his cheek that was already healing. "Come," he said, extending his hand toward me. "It's time to go." I climbed the stairs on shaking legs, my wolf urging me forward while my human mind screamed warnings. When I reached the main floor of the pack house, I gasped. The great room looked like a war zone. Furniture was overturned and broken, deep gouges scored the wooden walls, and there was blood spattered across the floor. Pack members huddled in corners, their eyes wide with terror as they watched Damon like he might attack at any moment. Alpha Marcus knelt in the center of the room, his head bowed in submission. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his right arm hung at an odd angle. Luna Selena stood behind him, her face pale but her eyes burning with fury. "Impossible," she breathed, staring at Damon. "The Blackthorn line died out decades ago." "Greatly exaggerated," Damon said mildly. He still held my hand, his fingers warm and steady around mine. "Now, about my mate." Marcus lifted his head, and I was shocked to see genuine fear in his eyes. "She belongs to this pack. She owes a debt." "She owes nothing," Damon cut him off, and power rolled off him in waves that made every wolf in the room flinch. "Her parents died defending your pack. You've repaid their sacrifice by enslaving their daughter. That debt is settled. You can't just take her," Marcus said, but there was no real authority in his voice anymore. "She's pack property. The laws." "The laws," Damon said softly, "were written by wolves like you to benefit wolves like you. But I am not like you, Marcus. I am something much older. Much more dangerous." As he spoke, the air around him began to shimmer. Power radiated from his skin like heat waves, and his eyes began to glow with silver light. The scent of ozone filled the room, like the moments before lightning strikes. I am Damon Blackthorne, he continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Last son of the first bloodline. King of the rogues and the lost. And this woman is my mate. The reaction was immediate. Every wolf in the room dropped to their knees, including Marcus and Selena. Even I felt the urge to submit, to bow before the sheer force of his presence. The first bloodline. I'd heard whispers of it in the old stories, the original werewolves, the ones who were said to have been blessed directly by the moon goddess herself. They were supposed to be legend, myth. But looking at Damon now, feeling the ancient power that rolled off him in waves, I believed every story I'd ever heard. Please, Selena said suddenly, her voice high and desperate. Please, don't destroy us. We can make a bargain. Damon's glowing eyes fixed on her. I'm listening. The girl, Selena said quickly. You can have her. But she must prove she's worthy of a Blackthorn. The old ways demand it. Selena, Marcus warned, but she ignored him. The trial of shadows, she continued. If she can survive it, she goes free. If she cannot. She shrugged, the gesture almost casual. I felt Damon tense beside me. The trial of shadows hasn't been used in over a century. It's a death sentence. Then she dies as a free wolf instead of living as a slave, Selena said sweetly. Unless, of course, you think your mate isn't strong enough. It was expertly done. A challenge wrapped in an insult, designed to push me into accepting something that would likely kill me. I should have stayed quiet, should have let Damon handle it. Instead, my newly awakened wolf surged forward, filling me with pride and fury. I accept, I said, lifting my chin. Arya, no, Damon said sharply, turning to face me. You don't understand what you're agreeing to. I understand perfectly, I lied. I had no idea what the trial of shadows involved, but I knew I couldn't let Selena think I was weak. Couldn't let her think I wasn't worthy of the man who'd claimed me as mate. I accept the trial. Selena's smile was triumphant. Excellent. The trial begins at moonrise. You'll enter the Shadowmere forest alone and unarmed. If you emerge before dawn, you win your freedom. And if she doesn't emerge? Damon asked, his voice deadly quiet. Then nature takes its course, Selena said with false sympathy. But I'm sure she'll be fine. After all, she's mated to the great Damon Blackthorne. The way she said his name made it clear she didn't believe her own words. She expected me to die in that forest. Expected it, and was probably counting on it. This is madness, Damon said, pulling me aside. Let me end this. I can kill them all and we can leave. No, I said firmly. I won't have you become a murderer for me. I can do this. His hands cupped my face, silver eyes searching mine. You don't understand, little wolf. The Shadowmere forest is cursed. Wolves who enter don't come out the same. If they come out at all. Then I'll be the first, I said with more confidence than I felt. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me against his chest. I could hear his heart beating, fast and strong, and the sound calmed something wild in my wolf. If anything happens to you, he murmured against my hair, I will burn this world to ash. I believed him. The hours until moonrise passed in a blur. I was given clean clothes, simple leggings and a tunic, and a meal, though I could barely eat. My stomach churned with nerves and something else, something that made me feel sick and dizzy. Selena brought me tea, claiming it would help with my nerves. I drank it gratefully, needing something to settle my queasy stomach. She watched me drink with bright, interested eyes. Feeling better? She asked when I'd drained the cup. Yes, thank you, I said, though I actually felt worse. The dizziness was getting stronger, and there was a strange metallic taste in my mouth. Selena smiled. Good. You'll need all your strength for what's coming. When moonrise came, the entire pack gathered at the edge of the Shadowmere forest. Even in the silver moonlight, the trees looked wrong somehow. Too dark, too twisted, like they were reaching toward the sky with gnarled fingers. Damon stood beside me, tension radiating from every line of his body. "It's not too late to change your mind," he said quietly. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. The forest felt evil, malevolent, like it was watching me with hungry eyes. And I felt terrible, weak and shaky, like I was coming down with the flu. But I thought of all the years of abuse, all the times Marcus and Selena had treated me like I was nothing. I thought of my parents, who'd died protecting these people, and how their sacrifice had been repaid. "I'm doing this," I said. Selena stepped forward, her face a mask of false concern. "The rules are simple, dear. Enter the forest alone. Find the heart of shadows at its center. Touch it, and return before dawn. Do this, and you win your freedom." She made it sound so easy. But I could see the anticipation in her eyes, the certainty that I wouldn't be coming back. I kissed Damon once, quickly, tasting storm and pine and something indefinably wild. Then I turned and walked into the forest. The moment I crossed the tree line, the world changed. The sounds of the pack behind me faded to nothing, swallowed by an unnatural silence. The moonlight that had illuminated the clearing couldn't penetrate the canopy overhead, leaving me in near total darkness. I'd only gone a few steps when I realized how much trouble I was in. My legs felt like they were made of lead. Each step was an effort, and my vision kept swimming in and out of focus. The metallic taste in my mouth was getting stronger, and I recognized it now for what it was. Wolfsbane. Selena had poisoned me. The tea, the concerned expressions, the helpful advice, it had all been an act. She dosed me with enough wolfsbane to weaken me, to make sure I'd fail the trial. I stumbled against a tree, bark scraping against my palms as I fought to stay upright. My wolf whimpered in my mind, her presence growing fainter as the poison worked its way through my system. Behind me, I could swear I heard Selena laughing. I had to keep moving. Dawn was still hours away, and I had no idea how far the heart of shadows was. If I stopped now, if I gave in to the weakness, I'd never see Damon again. So I pushed forward into the cursed darkness, poisoned and alone, not knowing that the trial of shadows was about to awaken something far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The Shadowmere forest was alive with malevolence. I'd been walking for what felt like hours, though time seemed to move differently here. The darkness pressed against me like a living thing, whispering promises of rest, of surrender. Every tree looked the same, their twisted branches reaching out to snag my clothes and scratch my skin. The wolfsbane was getting worse. My vision blurred constantly now, and my legs shook with each step. Sweat poured down my face despite the cold, and my heart hammered irregularly in my chest. Selena had given me enough poison to kill a normal wolf. But I wasn't normal, was I? Not anymore. My wolf pressed weakly against my consciousness, her presence fading as the toxin worked through my system. "Strong," she whispered. "We are strong. Must survive. Must live for mate." A branch snapped behind me, and I spun around, nearly losing my balance. Nothing there but shadows and the skeletal remains of dead trees. But I could feel eyes watching me, tracking my every movement. The first creature came at me from above. It dropped from the canopy like a nightmare made flesh, part wolf, part shadow, with eyes that burned red in the darkness. Its claws were longer than any natural wolf's, curved and sharp enough to shred steel. It hit the ground in front of me with a wet thud, and the smell of decay rolled off it in waves. I stumbled backward, my weakened wolf unable to shift, unable to protect me. The creature stalked forward, its movements fluid and wrong, like it was swimming through the air. "Not real," I whispered to myself. "It's just an illusion." The creature's claws raked across my arm, tearing through fabric and flesh. Blood welled up, hot and real, and pain shot through my nervous system. Real enough. I ran. Behind me, the creature howled, a sound like breaking glass and dying stars. More howls answered from deeper in the forest, and I knew I was being hunted. My legs gave out after only a few yards. I crashed to the forest floor, tasting dirt and blood. The wolfsbane was shutting down my system, making my muscles seize and my lungs struggle for air. The creature padded closer, taking its time now that I was down. It knew I couldn't run anymore. Get up, my wolf snarled weakly. Fight. Survive. I can't, I gasped. I'm too weak. Then we die here. And mate dies inside when he finds our body. The thought of Damon's pain, of his silver eyes going cold with grief, sent a spike of rage through me. No. I would not die in this cursed place. I would not leave him alone. I rolled to the side just as the creature pounced, its claws gouging deep trenches in the earth where I'd been lying. It spun toward me with supernatural speed, but something was happening to me, something that had nothing to do with my wolf. Power was building in my chest, different from anything I'd felt before. Not the wild, primal energy of my wolf's awakening, but something older. Something that hummed with the rhythm of the moon itself. The creature leaped again, and I threw my hands up instinctively. Silver light exploded from my palms. The creature disintegrated mid-air, its shadow flesh burning away like smoke. The light spread outward, illuminating the forest in a perfect circle around me. Other shapes scattered in the darkness beyond, fleeing the radiance that poured from my skin. I stared at my hands in shock. They glowed like captured moonlight, beautiful and terrible and impossible. What the hell? I breathed. But there was no time to wonder. The light was already fading, and I could hear more creatures circling in the darkness. I had to keep moving. The deeper I went into the forest, the worse the visions became. Dead pack members rose from the ground to accuse me of surviving when they hadn't. My parents appeared, their faces twisted with disappointment, asking why I hadn't saved them. Marcus materialized to drag me back to my chains, his whip cracking in the moonless air. I knew they were illusions, but they felt real. They spoke with voices I remembered, touched me with hands that left bruises. The forest was feeding on my fears, my guilt, my deepest wounds. The wolfsbane made it worse. Reality blurred at the edges, and I couldn't always tell what was real and what was nightmare. I fought shadow wolves and phantom alphas, fled from creatures that might have been tree branches swaying in the wind. My strength was failing. Each step was agony, each breath a monumental effort. I was dying by degrees, the poison eating away at my life force one heartbeat at a time. That's when I saw it, a clearing ahead, bathed in natural moonlight. And in the center, a pillar of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The heart of shadows. I stumbled toward it on legs that barely held my weight. Almost there. Almost done. Just had to touch it and turn back. But as I reached the edge of the clearing, the ground gave way beneath my feet. I fell into a pit trap, landing hard on a bed of sharp stones. Pain exploded through my ribs, and I tasted blood. Above me, the opening looked impossibly far away, the edges lined with smooth stone that offered no handholds. Laughter echoed from somewhere above. Not the malevolent whispers of the forest, but human laughter. Familiar laughter. Did you really think it would be that easy? Selena's voice drifted down to me, sweet and mocking. I looked up to see her standing at the edge of the pit, her perfect face illuminated by moonlight. She wasn't alone. A dozen figures stood with her, all wearing the black leather of the Shadow Council. The little wolf fell right into our trap, one of them said, a man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Just like the prophecy predicted. Prophecy? I managed to croak. Selena crouched at the edge of the pit, her blue eyes bright with triumph. Did you really think your parents died in a random rogue attack? They died because they refused to give up their moon-blessed daughter. Because they knew what you were, what you could become. Moon blessed. The word sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold stone beneath my body. Impossible, I whispered. The moon-blessed line died out centuries ago. So everyone thought, another council member said. But bloodlines have a way of hiding, of surviving even when the world thinks them dead. Your parents did an excellent job of concealing what you were. But they couldn't hide forever. Selena smiled down at me. The wolfsbane should have killed you by now. The fact that you're still breathing proves what we suspected. You're the last of them, Arya. The last moon-blessed wolf. And you belong to us now. The pieces clicked together in my mind. The years of abuse, the careful isolation, the way Marcus and Selena had kept me weak and afraid. They hadn't been punishing me, they'd been conditioning me, breaking down my will so I'd be easier to control when my powers manifested. You've been planning this for years, I said. Your whole life, Selena confirmed. Every beating, every humiliation, every moment of despair, all designed to keep you from realizing your true nature. Moon-blessed wolves draw their power from confidence, from self-worth. Keep them broken, and they never reach their potential. But they'd made one mistake. They'd let Daemon find me. They'd let me feel what it was like to be wanted, to be valued. And that had been enough to crack the walls they built around my power. The wolfsbane was killing me, but my rage was stronger than any poison. I thought of my parents, dying to protect a secret they'd never had the chance to share with me. I thought of Daemon, probably fighting his way through the forest right now, desperate to reach me. I thought of all the broken wolves who could be saved if someone with real power chose to protect them instead of exploit them. The power in my chest answered my call. Silver light erupted from my skin, so bright it turned night to day. The pit walls cracked under the force of it, stones splitting and crumbling. I rose into the air, lifted by currents of pure lunar energy, my hair whipping around my face like a silver banner. The Shadow Council members stepped back, their faces filled with awe and terror. Magnificent, Selena breathed. Even better than we hoped. I landed on the edge of the clearing, power crackling around me like lightning. For the first time in my life, I felt truly strong. Truly whole. You want to see what a moon-blessed wolf can do? I asked, my voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. Let me show you. Meanwhile, back at the pack house, Daemon paced the great room like a caged predator. Every instinct screamed at him to follow Arya into the forest, to tear apart anything that threatened his mate. But the trial's ancient laws bound even him. She had to face it alone, or it wouldn't count. She's been gone too long, he said for the 10th time, silver eyes fixed on the tree line. The trial takes time, Marcus said from his place on the floor. Daemon had allowed him to sit up, but he remained on his knees, properly submissive. Sometimes all night. If she dies in there, Daemon said quietly, I will make sure you follow her within the hour. She won't die, Selena said confidently. Too confidently. Daemon's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. What did you do? Nothing, she said innocently. I simply gave her some tea to calm her nerves before. Daemon moved faster than human eyes could follow. One moment he was across the room, the next his hand was wrapped around Selena's throat, lifting her off the ground. What was in the tea? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. Selena clawed at his grip, her face turning red. Just a little wolfsbane. Not enough to kill her. Just enough to weaken her, to make the trial fair. Roars of rage filled the room as Daemon's control snapped. Power exploded from him, ancient and terrible, making the very foundations of the house shake. Every wolf in the room cowered as his fury washed over them. You poisoned my mate, he snarled, his grip tightening. The council's orders, Selena gasped. Had to make sure she was weak enough to capture when she came out. The council. Daemon's blood ran cold. What council? Shadow Council, Marcus said reluctantly. They've been watching her for years, waiting for her powers to manifest. They know what she is. And what is she? Daemon demanded, though part of him was already beginning to suspect. Moon-blessed, Selena wheezed. Last of the bloodline. They want to weaponize her, use her power to control all the packs. Damon released her, and she crumpled to the floor, gasping. His mind raced, putting together pieces of a puzzle he should have seen sooner. Arya's unusual strength even as a supposed Omega. The way she'd shattered spelled silver chains. The power he'd sensed in her even before her wolf awakened. She wasn't just his mate. She was one of the rarest supernatural beings alive. And she was trapped in a cursed forest, poisoned and alone, while enemies closed in around her. How many council members are here? He demanded. Dozen, maybe more, Marcus said. They're waiting at the edge of the forest. Soon as she comes out, they'll take her. Damon was already moving toward the door when a familiar voice stopped him cold. Actually, Damon, they're already moving. He spun around to see Kieran stepping through the doorway. His beta, his most trusted friend, the man who'd stood at his side for over a century. Kieran's usually warm brown eyes were cold now, apologetic but resolved. Hello, brother, Kieran said softly. I'm sorry it had to be this way. The betrayal hit Damon like a physical blow. How long? 5 years, Kieran admitted. Ever since we first heard whispers about a moon-blessed bloodline still existing. The council made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I trusted you, Damon said, his voice hollow. I know. And I hated every moment of it. But this is bigger than your feelings, Damon. Bigger than one wolf's happiness. The moon-blessed could change everything, could bring order to our chaotic world. By enslaving her? By guiding her, Kieran corrected. The council isn't evil, Damon. They want to use her power to create peace, to stop the endless territorial wars, to unite all the packs under one rule. Their rule, Damon said. Kieran nodded. Yes. Their rule. Before Damon could respond, the night exploded with silver light. It poured through the windows, bright as a second sun, illuminating the forest like day. Power crashed over them in waves, ancient and pure and magnificent. She's awakened, Kieran breathed, staring toward the forest in wonder. My God, the power readings we're getting. But Damon was no longer listening. His mate was in danger, betrayed by enemies and friends alike. Nothing else mattered. He shifted mid-stride, his human form dissolving into something massive and terrible. Not just a wolf, but something primordial, something that predated the modern packs by millennia. His howl shook the foundations of the house as he leaped through the nearest window, racing toward the forest and the woman whose light called to his very soul. Behind him, Kieran spoke into a small radio. She's manifested. Full awakening. Move in now, before Blackthorn reaches her. In the Shadowmere forest, silver light faded as Arya staggered, the massive display of power having drained her already poisoned system. The Shadow Council members moved in, their tranquilizer weapons ready, their faces grim with purpose. She'd found her power, but she was about to lose her freedom. And in the distance, Damon's answering howl promised that this war was just beginning. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. I woke to the sound of screaming. Not my own, though my body felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The screaming came from somewhere else in whatever hellhole they brought me to, echoing off stone walls with the kind of hopeless agony that spoke of prolonged suffering. My head pounded as I tried to sit up, the after effects of both the wolfsbane and my power surge leaving me weak and disoriented. I was in a cell, not the crude cellar I'd known at the pack house, but something far more sophisticated. The walls were lined with silver-infused steel, and I could feel the subtle hum of magical suppressors in the air. You're awake. The voice came from the cell across the narrow corridor. A woman, though her voice was so hoarse I could barely make out the words. I was beginning to think they'd given you too much sedative. I squinted through the dim light filtering down from somewhere above. The woman was pressed against the bars of her cell, her face mostly hidden in shadow. But there was something familiar about the way she held herself, something that made my heart clench with impossible hope. "Who are you?" I asked, though part of me was afraid to hear the answer. She stepped closer to the bars, and what little light there was illuminated her face. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. She had my eyes, my nose, my stubborn chin. But her dark hair was streaked with premature silver, and her face was gaunt with years of suffering. Scars crisscrossed her arms and neck, some from claws, others that looked deliberate, surgical. "Hello, my little star," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "You've grown so beautiful." "Mom?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "But you're dead. I saw your body. I attended your funeral." Tears tracked down her hollow cheeks. "They needed you to think I was dead. Needed you isolated, alone, with no one to teach you about your heritage. A scared, broken wolf is much easier to control than one who knows her worth." I pressed myself against my own bars, desperate to reach her. "How long have you been here?" 18 years, she said simply. "Since the night they killed me." 18 years. Almost my entire life. While I'd grieved for her, blamed myself for not being strong enough to save her, she'd been here. Suffering. Alone. "What did they do to you?" Her laugh was bitter, broken. "Experiments. They knew what I was, what you would become. They wanted to understand our power, to see if they could replicate it. They've been trying to create artificial moon-blessed wolves for decades." Another scream echoed through the corridors, and I flinched. "How many others?" "Too many," Mom said. "Hundreds, over the years. Most don't survive the process. Those that do." She gestured vaguely toward the sound of screaming. "They're not the same anymore. The artificial magic drives them mad, turns them into something between wolf and wraith." Horror washed over me as I began to understand the scope of what the Shadow Council had been doing. This wasn't just about capturing me, this was about decades of torture, of experimenting on innocent wolves in pursuit of power. "The ones who survive," I said carefully, "what happens to them?" "They become weapons," Mom said. "Mindless soldiers bound to the Council's will. They call them shadowhounds. Completely loyal, completely ruthless, and just powerful enough to subdue normal wolves." I thought of the creature that had attacked me in the forest, its wrong movements and burning red eyes. "I think I met one." "Then you're lucky to be alive. They usually don't leave survivors." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of suffering. Finally, I worked up the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my chest. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you prepare me for what I was?" Her face crumpled with guilt. "We tried to hide you from this fate. Your father and I, we thought if we kept you weak, if we made sure your powers never manifested, maybe you could live a normal life. Maybe you could escape the prophecy." "What prophecy?" Mom's eyes went distant, and when she spoke, it was in the formal cadence of ancient ritual. "When the moon bleeds and the wolves cry out, when pack turns against pack and the old ways fail, the Luna of all packs shall rise. Born of the first blood and blessed by the silver light, she will either unite the children of the moon under one banner, or watch the world burn in the ashes of her vengeance." The word sent a chill through me. The Luna of all packs? "The one destined to rule over every werewolf in existence," Mom explained. "Some interpret the prophecy as salvation, a benevolent ruler who will end the territorial wars and bring peace. Others see it as destruction, a tyrant who will crush all opposition under her heel. And which do you think it is?" She looked at me with eyes full of love and fear in equal measure. "I think it depends on what the world does to you first. On whether you choose to lead with your heart or your rage." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Council members approached, led by a man I recognized from the clearing, tall, cold-eyed, with the bearing of someone used to absolute authority. "Councilman Voss," my mother said, her voice filled with loathing. "Lydia," he replied cordially, as if greeting an old friend instead of a woman he'd tortured for nearly 2 decades. And our newest acquisition. Miss Moonheart, yes, that's your real name, dear. Your parents were quite dramatic. Let her go, I said, rising to my feet despite the weakness in my legs. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, but I need her alive to ensure your cooperation, Voss said with a cold smile. You see, we've learned from our mistakes with past subjects. Raw power without emotional investment leads to instability. But a moon-blessed wolf with something to lose? That's much more manageable. He gestured to the guards behind him. Bring her to Lab 7. It's time to begin the conditioning process. No. I threw myself against the bars as they opened my mother's cell. Leave her alone. The more you struggle, the more she suffers, Voss said mildly as they dragged my weakened mother away. Think about that while we work. I screamed her name as they disappeared around a corner, my voice echoing off the stone walls. Power built in my chest, silver light beginning to leak from my skin, but the suppressors in the walls absorbed it before it could build to anything useful. Hours passed. I heard my mother screaming once, a sound that cut through me like a blade, and then nothing. The silence was somehow worse than the noise. That's when I heard it, a sound so faint I almost missed it. Howling, distant but growing closer. Not the mad baying of the shadowhounds, but something else. Something wild and free and familiar. Damon. Outside the Shadow Council's fortress, Damon crouched on a ridge overlooking the ancient stronghold. It was carved into the side of a mountain, its entrances heavily guarded and warded against supernatural assault. Getting in would be a nightmare. Getting out alive with Arya would be impossible. Unless he wasn't doing it alone. Ugly place, said a voice behind him. Damon didn't turn around. He'd scented the newcomer long before they'd spoken. Alpha Kane. I'm surprised you came. Surprised myself, Kane admitted, settling down beside him. The Alpha of the Northern Territories was a massive man even in human form, with graying hair and scars that told the story of decades of warfare. But when Kieran reached out with his little offer, I had to see for myself. And what did you see? That the Shadow Council has been taking my wolves for years, Kane said grimly. Good wolves. Strong wolves. They disappear in the night, and we find their bodies weeks later, or what's left of them. If they've got some kind of super weapon in there, I want it stopped before they come for my daughter. Other shapes emerged from the darkness. More alphas, their packs spread out behind them like an army of shadows. The mountain pack, the coastal wolves, the desert runners, territorial enemies who'd never worked together in recorded history. This is unprecedented, said Alpha Reyna of the coastal pack, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. 5 major packs, united for a single purpose. Desperation makes for strange alliances, Damon replied. The council won't stop with Arya. Once they've perfected their process, they'll come for every pack that doesn't bow to their rule. So what's the plan? Kane asked. That place is a fortress. We could lose half our wolves just getting to the front door. Damon smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Who said anything about using the front door? He pulled out a set of architectural plans. Stolen from Kieran's personal files during their confrontation. The fortress is built into the mountain, but it's also built over an old silver mine. The tunnels are still there, abandoned but intact. We go in from below. And then? Then we remind the Shadow Council why the old bloodlines were never meant to be caged. I was dozing fitfully when the explosion came. The entire fortress shook, dust raining down from the ceiling as something massive struck the upper levels. Emergency alarms began blaring, and I could hear guards running through the corridors, shouting orders. Another explosion, closer this time. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard the distinctive sound of silver bars being torn apart. Not cut or melted, torn, with enough force to shred steel like paper. Arya. Damon's voice, rough with desperation and rage. Here. I called back. I'm here. Light flooded the corridor as he rounded the corner, his eyes glowing with silver fire. He'd shifted partially, his human form enhanced with his wolf strength and senses. Behind him came other wolves, alphas I didn't recognize, their faces grim with purpose. "Stand back," he ordered, and I pressed myself against the far wall of my cell. He gripped the bars of my cage and pulled. The silver-infused steel groaned, bent, and finally gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. I stumbled into his arms, breathing in his scent of pine and storm and safety. "We have to find my mother," I said against his chest. "She's alive, Damon. They've had her here for 18 years. His arms tightened around me. "We'll find her. But first we need to get you out of here." "The labs," I said. "She's in Lab 7. We can't leave without her." One of the other alphas, a massive man with gray hair, shook his head. "Too dangerous. Half the council's forces are between us and the labs. We'd never make it." "Then I'll make my own way," I said, pulling away from Damon. "Arya, no," he started, but I was already moving. Power built in my chest, different from before. Not the wild, uncontrolled surge I'd experienced in the forest, but something focused, purposeful. I thought of my mother's broken voice, of 18 years of torture, of all the wolves who'd died in the council's experiments. Silver light exploded from my skin, but this time I controlled it, shaped it, turned it into a weapon. The blast tore through the fortress like a silver hurricane. Stone walls cracked and crumbled, steel beams twisted like taffy, and the magical suppressors that had kept me weak shattered like glass. The power poured out of me in waves, seeking every council member within reach. I heard them screaming as the light found them. Not the clean death of battle, but something far worse. The lunar energy invaded their bodies, turning their own life force against them, burning them from the inside out. When the light finally faded, I stood in the wreckage of what had been a corridor, surrounded by the twisted remains of stone and steel. And scattered throughout the debris were the council members who'd been unfortunate enough to be caught in the blast. They were dead. All of them. And I had killed them without even trying. "Jesus," one of the alphas breathed. "What kind of power is that?" I stared at my hands, still glowing faintly with residual energy. I'd wanted to save my mother, to escape this place. I hadn't meant to kill anyone. But the power had responded to my emotions, to my rage and desperation, and it had acted without conscious direction. "The prophecy," Damon said quietly, understanding in his voice. "You're her. The Luna of all packs." I looked at the destruction I'd caused, at the bodies of wolves who might have had families, who might have thought they were doing the right thing. "I didn't mean to." "Power like that," the gray-haired alpha said carefully, "it could unite every pack in existence. Or destroy them all. The choice." My mother had said it would come down to a choice between heart and rage, between salvation and vengeance. Looking at the dead wolves around me, I realized the choice had already begun. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The fortress continued to shake as we made our way through the wreckage toward the labs. My uncontrolled burst of power had carved a path of destruction through the ancient stronghold, but it had also alerted every remaining council member to our location. "This way," I said, following the pull of my wolf toward where they'd taken my mother. The bond between us had always been strong, even when I'd thought her dead. Now it sang in my blood, guiding me through corridors thick with dust and the acrid smell of twisted metal. Behind us, the sound of battle echoed through the mountain. The allied packs were fighting their way deeper into the fortress, but council forces were rallying, and I could hear the inhuman howls of the shadowhounds being released. "Arya," Damon said, catching my arm as I stumbled. "You're pushing too hard. That power surge nearly killed you." He was right. I could feel the lunar energy burning through my veins like acid, beautiful and terrible and barely contained. Each step sent silver light crackling across my skin, and my vision kept shifting between human sight and something else entirely, a way of seeing that showed me the life force of every creature in the fortress. I can handle it, I lied, though we both knew it wasn't true. We found Lab 7 behind a door marked with biohazard symbols and warded with magic so dark it made my skin crawl. Damon tore through the barriers like they were paper, his own power responding to mine, amplifying it. Inside, the scene was worse than anything I could have imagined. My mother lay strapped to a table in the center of the room, her body convulsing as machines pumped something luminescent into her veins. Around the walls, dozens of glass tanks held floating figures, wolves in various stages of transformation, their bodies twisted and wrong, suspended in fluid that glowed with artificial moonlight. The failed experiments, Alpha Cain said grimly, taking in the horror around us. God Almighty. But I only had eyes for my mother. I rushed to her side, my hands already glowing as I reached for the restraints holding her down. Don't, she gasped, her eyes wild with pain and something else, warning. It's a trap, little star. He's been waiting for you. Before I could ask what she meant, slow applause echoed through the lab. A figure stepped out of the shadows at the far end of the room, and my blood turned to ice. He looked like Damon might in 20 years, tall, silver-haired, with the same aristocratic features and piercing eyes. But where Damon's eyes held warmth and honor, this man's were cold as winter stars. Magnificent entrance, my dear, he said, his voice cultured and smooth. Though I do wish you'd been a bit more careful with my fortress. Some of those walls are over 1,000 years old. Damon went perfectly still beside me. Father. Hello, son. The former rogue king stepped closer, and I could feel the power radiating from him. Ancient, corrupted, and hungry. You've done well. Better than I dared hope. You're supposed to be dead, Damon said, his voice hollow with shock. Death is such a limiting concept, his father replied with a cold smile. I found it much more useful to let the world think me gone while I worked behind the scenes. Amazing what you can accomplish when no one knows you exist. The pieces clicked together in my mind with horrible clarity. You founded the Shadow Council. I am the Shadow Council, he corrected. The others are simply employees. Useful tools in a much grander design. The experiments, Alpha Cain said, rage building in his voice. The missing wolves. That was all you. Research and development, Damon's father said dismissively. Though I prefer to think of it as evolution. The werewolf race has grown stagnant, weak. Divided into squabbling packs when we should stand united under strong leadership. Your leadership, Damon said. Of course. Who else has the vision to guide our people into a new age? He gestured toward me with proprietary satisfaction. And now, with the last moon-blessed wolf finally awakened, I can complete the work of centuries. I felt sick. You manipulated everything. My parents' death, my enslavement, even your meeting with my son, yes. His smile was triumphant. Love is such a powerful motivator. I knew that if Damon found his mate in distress, he would move heaven and earth to save her. And in doing so, he would bring her directly to me. Damon's hands clenched into fists, power crackling around him like lightning. You used me. I used your nobility, his father corrected. Your compulsive need to save the innocent, to protect the weak. It's always been your greatest weakness, son. Though in this case, it served my purposes perfectly. The machines around my mother began beeping faster, and I realized with horror that whatever they were pumping into her was accelerating. She convulsed again, her back arching off the table. What are you doing to her? I demanded. Preparing the ritual space, he said calmly. You see, your mother has been my test subject for nearly 2 decades. I've learned exactly how moon-blessed power works, how it flows, how it can be redirected. The process that's killing her will create a conduit between your bloodlines. When I perform the rite of severance, her death will anchor your power to me instead of you. You're insane, I whispered. I'm visionary, he corrected. Imagine it, the power of the moon-blessed combined with the authority of the original bloodline. I would become not just a king, but a god among wolves. Every pack on earth would kneel before me. Never, Damon snarled, stepping protectively in front of me. His father's expression turned pitying. Oh, my dear boy. You still don't understand. This was always the plan. You were never meant to keep her. You were meant to deliver her. The attack came without warning. Not from the former rogue king, but from the walls themselves. Hidden panels slid open, revealing council members armed with weapons that hummed with dark energy. At the same time, the glass tanks around the room began cracking, spilling their contents onto the floor. The failed experiments rose like nightmares made flesh. Some were more shadow than substance, others twisted amalgamations of wolf and human features. All of them had the same burning red eyes I'd seen in the forest. Kill the others, the former rogue king commanded. But bring me the girl alive. The lab erupted into chaos. Damon and the other alphas fought desperately against impossible odds while I stood frozen, watching my mother's life drain away on the table before me. Power built in my chest again, silver light beginning to pour from my skin. But this time I could feel it differently, not just raw energy, but something deeper. The very essence of what made werewolves what they were, the connection between all of our kind. That's it, the former rogue king said, his eyes bright with anticipation. Let it build. Let it consume you. The more power you channel, the more I'll be able to claim. But he was wrong about one thing. This wasn't just my power, it was ours. Every wolf who'd ever lived, every pack that had ever been, every bond of loyalty and love that connected our people. I could feel them all, stretching back through the centuries. And I could feel something else. The curses that bound us, the ancient magic that kept us divided and weak. Bloodline restrictions that prevented interpack mating. Territorial compulsions that drove us to fight over scraps of land. The gradual weakening of our wolves that had been going on for generations. I can see it all, I whispered, wonder filling my voice. What? Damon asked, still fighting off two shadowhounds. The whole web. Everything that's been done to us, all the ways we've been diminished. I looked at my mother, her life hanging by a thread, then at Damon's father, who thought he could steal what belonged to our people. All the ways we've been made to forget what we really are. Understanding dawned in the former rogue king's eyes. No. You can't. The power required would kill you. Maybe, I said. But I won't let you turn me into a weapon. I placed my hands on my mother's chest, feeling her fading heartbeat beneath my palms. Silver light poured from me, but this time I wasn't trying to destroy, I was trying to heal. Not just her, but everything that had been broken. The power that erupted from me wasn't the wild, destructive force I'd unleashed before. This was purposeful, controlled, ancient beyond measure. It flowed out from the lab, through the fortress, across the mountain and beyond. Everywhere it touched, the old curses began to crack and crumble. I felt territorial boundaries dissolve, the compulsions that kept packs apart simply evaporating. Bloodline restrictions snapped like chains, freeing wolves to love and mate as they chose. The gradual weakening that had plagued our kind for centuries reversed itself, strength flowing back into wolves who'd never known they were diminished. The shadowhounds throughout the fortress collapsed, the artificial magic that animated them unable to sustain itself against the tide of pure lunar power. Council members cried out as their dark abilities abandoned them, leaving them merely human. And in the center of it all, my mother's eyes fluttered open, clear and bright for the first time in 18 years. My little star, she whispered, her voice strong again. You've done it. But the former rogue king wasn't finished. With a roar of rage, he lunged toward me, his own power crackling around him like black lightning. If I can't have your abilities, then no one can. Damon intercepted him mid-leap, and the two crashed to the ground in a tangle of claws and fury. Father against son, old power against new, corruption against honor. This is how it has to be, Damon said as they grappled. You made your choice long ago. And you've made yours, his father snarled back. Choosing her over your own blood. She is my blood now, Damon replied. She's my mate, my Luna, my everything. With a final surge of strength, he pinned his father to the ground. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the former rogue king smiled. Fool, he whispered. Did you think I came here without a contingency plan? The fortress began to shake again, but this time it wasn't from my power. Deep beneath us, something was stirring. Something that had been sleeping in the mountain's depths for far longer than any werewolf civilization. What have you done? Alpha Cain demanded. Awakened the old ones, the former rogue king said with satisfaction. Dragons sleep deep in these mountains, boy. They've been dormant for 1,000 years, but the girl's power surge has roused them. Soon they'll emerge, and when they find the world changed, they'll want answers. They'll want blood. Through the fortress walls, I could hear something massive stirring far below. Ancient, powerful, and very, very angry. The supernatural world has been in hiding since the humans took over, he continued. But now that the moon blessed have returned, now that the old magics are flowing again, they'll all come out of the shadows. Vampires, fae, demons, things that haven't been seen since the Dark Ages. Your little healing spell has rung the dinner bell, my dear. And we're all on the menu. I felt the truth of his words in my bones. My power had indeed awakened things that were better left sleeping. But looking at my mother's healed face, at the strength flowing back into the wolves around me, at Damon's eyes bright with love and pride, I knew I'd made the right choice. Then we'll face them together, I said simply. All of us. United. The former rogue king laughed, even as council forces throughout the fortress surrendered or fled. You have no idea what's coming for you. Maybe not, Damon said, rising to his feet and extending his hand to me. But we'll learn. And we'll survive. Because that's what wolves do. I took his hand, feeling our bond strengthen and deepen as our powers flowed together. Around us, the other alphas knelt, not in submission, but in recognition. Luna Queen, Alpha Cain said formally. What are your orders? Luna Queen. The title felt strange on my shoulders, heavy with responsibility and possibility in equal measure. But looking at these wolves who'd risked everything to save me, at the mother I'd thought lost forever, at the mate who'd moved heaven and earth to find me, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. We go home, I said. All of us. We heal our people, strengthen our bonds, and prepare for what's coming. The age of divided packs is over. From now on, we stand as one. Outside, the first dragon's roar echoed across the mountain, ancient and terrible and hungry. The old world was ending. A new one was about to begin. And I would meet it as what I'd always been meant to be, not a slave, not a weapon, but a queen. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.